Thanks for coming. My name is Jake Simmons, and I'm the Lisk ambassador for Costa Rica. Before I get started, I just want to thank the Blockchain Association of Costa Rica for putting on this event, and also Club Union for hosting us, and last but not least, NIMIC for sponsoring this event. So I created an organization here in Costa Rica called Lisk Central America. And essentially what our mission is for this organization is to make blockchain more accessible. I'm not just talking about Lisk, I mean all blockchain technologies, make them more accessible. We've been trying to do, focusing on three main points to achieve these goals. Basically developing tools for developers to make blockchain development easier, promotion, events like this, and educational events, what I'll be talking about today as well. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about what Lisk is. Lisk is a blockchain application platform that allows developers to create independent side chains for their applications. This is done through an SDK, a sidechain development kit, if you will, that is completely written in JavaScript, more specifically TypeScript for us developers in the room. I'm going to show you a video next, kind of just an overview of what the Lisk platform is.
Lisk is a platform in which developers can build, publish, distribute, and monetize their own blockchain applications. A blockchain application looks and feels like a regular application, but it's built on top of a blockchain or decentralized network, rather than hosted and managed by a single entity. However, a number of challenges associated with developing blockchain applications, such as a lack of tooling and frameworks, prevents it from being widely adopted. Lisk aims to remove these obstacles by providing developers with an easy-to-use sidechain development kit to build their own blockchain applications. Each blockchain application runs on top of its own sidechain, a fully customizable blockchain that's connected to Lisk's main chain. And the SDK is completely written in JavaScript, the most commonly used programming language in the world. So, with Lisk, everyone can develop decentralized social networks, messengers, games, exchanges, storage platforms, and much more, without the complexity of developing a blockchain from scratch. Access the power of blockchain with Lisk.
Alright, so what does that mean exactly? So as a developer, you're going to be able to create your own white label sidechain. So this will be your own independent chain for your application. With that comes the ability to customize it how you see fit for your individual application. And then from there, from the sidechain, you can build your application over top of your sidechain. And within the Lisk ecosystem, you can use it to test, develop, and promote your application. The main software behind the Lisk network, the software that basically creates the peer-to-peer network, is called Lisk Core. Currently version 1.5, and the consensus algorithm that the network uses is delegated proof of stake. It's the same consensus algorithm as EOS. For developers in the room, the main three components that make up Lisk Core are Node.js, PostgreSQL, and Redis. Now I'm going to play you another video that goes in a little bit more detail of what Lisk Core is, but has a very good broad definition of how blockchains work as well.
In order to understand Lisk Core, let's first talk about the client-server relationship. What is the client-server relationship? Every time a computer or an application wants to connect to the internet to access a web page or transfer data, the device needs to send a request to a server. The device used to send the request is called the client. The server receives the request, checks its validity, processes the data, and fulfills the request by providing information to the client. All the data processed by the server is stored in a database. A database is a collection of information that is organized so that it can be easily accessed, managed, and updated. You can imagine it as a big Excel file that contains all sorts of information, such as email addresses, usernames, passwords, and preference settings. Each time a client wants to read or write data into a database, for example, to log into an account, the client sends a specific request to the server. The server will retrieve the required data from the database, compare it to the request, process, and then respond to it, in this example, with a successful login. This is a centralized model, as there is a single server managing all of the requests. However, blockchain technology offers an alternative, a decentralized network, in which requests can be handled by any of the network's participants, also known as nodes. Every node is responsible for holding and feeding an individual copy of the database, which is constantly synchronized alongside the other nodes of the network. This creates multiple identical copies of the information, which validates every piece of the stored data. This distributed network of databases is called blockchain. Blockchains are made up of many nodes communicating and synchronizing within them. For example, the Lisk network is composed of hundreds of nodes. So, how does a server become a Lisk node? In order for a machine to become a Lisk node, the server needs to follow the Lisk protocol. The Lisk protocol is a theoretical set of rules that includes the consensus algorithm, security standards, block creation processes, peer-to-peer communication handles, and several defined transaction types. Lisk core is the program that implements the Lisk protocol. In other words, Lisk core is what every machine needs to set up in order to run a node that allows for participation in the network. That's why every time there's a new release of core, it's recommended for every node to update to the latest version. But of course, a decentralized network can't exist with only one node. When multiple servers become Lisk nodes and follow the same set of rules, they automatically start to communicate, become peers, and establish the decentralized network. So, who can run a node? The fascinating part of blockchain technology is that everyone is able to set up a node and become part of the network, even though it is not mandatory to run a node in order to participate in the network. There are two ways to participate in the network. The first option is to connect to an existing node using one of Lisk's user interfaces, like Lisk Hub. Every time someone uses Lisk Hub to connect to the Lisk network, it connects to a Lisk node which is running core, containing the latest information available. Lisk Hub is a simple and easy-to-use way of accessing the network and using its functionalities. The second way to participate in the network is by setting up your own Lisk node and connect it to the other nodes in the network. But why would someone set up their own node? An individual could be interested in having their own copy of the blockchain to monitor or verify data. For example, those interested in monitoring and contributing to the security of the Lisk network, exchanges, delegates, and large holders will often choose to run their own node. So, what is Lisk core? In short, Lisk core is the code base of the rules established by the Lisk protocol. It is a mandatory program to be executed on every node in the Lisk network and guarantees the validity of the data contained within the Lisk blockchain and the new data being written on it.
Alright, now I'm going to talk about the one issue that is plaguing the blockchain industry as a whole and what needs to advance for blockchain to become mainstream. And that one topic is scalability. So right now you can see on the slide the three most known blockchain networks, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and EOS, and their respective transactions per second. Meaning how many transactions a second can happen or can they handle on that given network. And also the given consensus for each one of those networks. Bitcoin being proof of work, and it can handle roughly around 7 transactions per second. Ethereum, which is proof of work right now, but will soon be switching over to a proof of stake or hybrid first, then proof of stake, which will increase the 15 transactions per second roughly now. And then there's EOS, which runs a delegated proof-of-stake consensus, which I think they recently tested up to 3,100 transactions per second were able to be handled on the EOS network. So the next slide, I'm going to show you the comparison of, this is the current day of what some of the most known blockchain networks can do to real-world applications and how much they scale. So right now, on average, Facebook has 50,000 likes per second, and Twitter has about 7,000 tweets per second. So as you can see, even one of these applications is way too big for any given blockchain network that's out there right now, let alone hundreds of thousands of applications running on one blockchain. So yes, they are making strides, all blockchains, to scale on-chain scalability and scaling it vertically. I know Vitalik and Bose has been trying to say that they want to get Ethereum on-chain transactions up to 1 million transactions per second. But even if you could snap your fingers and say, hey, we got 1 million transactions per second today, that still would get eaten up really quickly. You just need a few big mainstream killer apps who would take up all the bandwidth of one public chain. So someone mentioned this application earlier today. I don't know how familiar you guys are with CryptoKitties. Yes, the internet was made for cats, and apparently blockchain was too. People love to create and trade digital cats on the Ethereum network. Don't ask me why, they do it, and they do it in big numbers. I think even today, CryptoKitties equates up to 25% of all transactions that happen on Ethereum. And I think it was this time last year that CryptoKitties was so popular, it was bringing the entire Ethereum network to a crawl, meaning no one else could execute their smart contracts or make transactions because CryptoKitties was so popular and eating up all the bandwidth, essentially. So CryptoKitties is situated like this on the Ethereum chain. The Ethereum chain is one single public blockchain, and on there you have smart contracts, and one of those smart contracts is CryptoKitties. And like I said, one contract can make all the other contracts come to a slow. You might think business-wise that doesn't really make any sense. Your business relies on your smart contracts executing in a relatively quick fashion. And where one application or one smart contract can stop that from happening, that's not good. So what a few people are suggesting, as well as Lisk, is that we can scale blockchains vertically, but what we need to do indefinitely is we need to scale them horizontally. So that, in one of those fashions, is something called side chains. So essentially you'll have your main chain, your main public chain, but as a developer you'll be able to create your own side chain that is used specifically for you and your application. So there's still a lot of technical details that are being worked out with side chains and how interoperability is going to happen between the side chains and the main chain and vice versa. But it's being worked on today. So some of the benefits of having a side chain is separation of concern. Something in software engineering that we call, it's a design principle where we want to separate not only code and logic, but also infrastructure into sections, business sections, of things that concern one topic or one business rule, not having them all in one spot. So with side chains, you theoretically could have an application running on 20, 30, 40, 50 different side chains. So for example, Facebook, you could have one side chain specifically for likes, you could have one for comments, one for posts, and so on and so forth. So you can think about breaking down your application that way. It's similar to microservice-oriented architecture today in modern web development, where you're not having one monolithic API or database anymore. You're having microservice architecture where you have many API endpoints that service a specific business case, and same with the data that goes along with it. And two, you have the ability to customize your sidechain. So if you wanted to run a smart contract on Ethereum, you are tied and bound by the rules of Ethereum or whatever other chain. But if you have your own customizable sidechain, you can customize it to specifically your needs for that specific niche case of that function. Also, the reliability, you know that the throughput of the chain, so let's just say it's 10 transactions per second. You know that your application can do 10 transactions per second. Like I was referring to with CryptoKitties, sure, Ethereum has a 15 transaction per second throughput, but that's not going to be all yours. You're sharing it with everyone else on that chain. So with a sidechain, you're going to get 100% of the throughput with that sidechain. Also, you're reducing business risk. So, as someone mentioned earlier today, enterprise development is a lot different than open source development. Big businesses are not going to want to risk putting their business applications on a public chain that can be disrupted by other people and not in their control. So this is where we get into hybrid solutions or completely customizable sidechains where not only can they customize the sidechain, they're also in control of the infrastructure. So they don't have to trust anonymous people to run their nodes. They can be running it themselves. So as a whole, this is, like I said, I think this is one of the biggest issues with the blockchain industry that we need to come over the hurdle is scalability. And sidechains, I think, is one of the solutions that is going to take us where we need to go. I'm just going to finish up with a little bit about the Lisk development roadmap, just a quick touch on. So right now, they are in the architecture and design phase of the roadmap, right here. The Alpha SDK should be here probably within 3 to 4 months. And then from there, they're going to work on the security, the network, and also improving some consensus problems with delegated proof of stakes. And then from there, the beta SDK will be released. And then from there, ICOs will be allowed on the network and multiple chains will be allowed to be created. And then the RC SDK and then the actual production SDK will be released. So also, anything that I've talked about today can be found on Lisk Academy. Not only anything about Lisk, but just general blockchain education. It's very agnostic. It does a really good job of just, it's not tribal. It just teaches you the basics of blockchain education, what you need to know. So if you want to check that out, that's great. I was going to have a quiz, but I think we're tight for time, so I'm just going to, I have some Lisk t-shirts. I'm just going to put them at the back there, so if you guys want to grab some Lisk t-shirts, they'll be back there. And any quick questions? I know we're trying to wrap it up quick. No? Okay, good. Thank you guys. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dick.